when a man tried to intimidate a young man at the gym. He had no idea he was messing with someone who had spent years honing his skills in silence. What happened next left the entire room speechless. The City Fit gym in downtown Seattle was buzzing with its usual post-work crowd. The air was thick with the sounds of clanking weights, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, and the rhythmic beat of pop music playing faintly in the background. Among the crowd was Ethan, a 27-year-old man with a wiry frame, pale skin, and an air of quiet determination. Ethan wasn't the kind of person who stood out in a gym full of people. He kept to himself, his movements purposeful as he worked through a routine of pull-ups, deadlifts, and squats. Dressed in a loose-fitting gray hoodie and black shorts, Ethan looked like any other gym-goer, blending into the chaos. He had just moved to the squat rack, adjusting the bar and plates with meticulous precision. His routine was his sanctuary, a methodical process that helped him channel years of discipline. As Ethan reached for the bar, a man approached, his presence like an unwelcome shadow. The man was in his late 40s, tall and broad, his muscles bulging beneath a tight tank top. He exuded the kind of arrogance that comes from years of being the biggest guy in the room. His smirk was condescending as he stood next to Ethan, arms crossed. "You're using that wrong," the man said, his tone dripping with patronizing confidence. Ethan paused, looking up from the bar. He slid one earbud out and met the man's gaze with a calm expression. "Sorry, what?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. "The weights," the man continued, gesturing at the bar. "You're setting them up wrong. You're going to hurt yourself if you keep doing it like that. Let me show you the right way." Ethan blinked, then smiled faintly. "Thanks, but I've got it," he replied, turning back to his setup. He wasn't interested in engaging further. But the man didn't move. Instead, he took a step closer, planting himself firmly by the rack as if staking a claim. "I've been coming here for years," he said, his voice louder now, drawing the attention of a few nearby gym-goers. "Trust me, I know what I'm talking about." Ethan took a deep breath, his grip on the bar tightening. "Appreciate the concern," he said without looking at the man, "but I'm good." He slid his earbud back in, hoping that would be the end of it. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. He muttered something under his breath, words that Ethan couldn't make out but could sense in the tension that lingered nearby. A few people exchanged glances but said nothing. The unspoken rule of the gym was to mind your own business, even when the atmosphere felt charged. Ethan continued his workout, ignoring the man's presence as best as he could. But it was hard to ignore someone who insisted on hovering nearby. Every time Ethan moved to a new station, the man seemed to find a reason to follow, muttering critiques and watching him with a mix of irritation and disbelief. Ethan kept his focus on his routine, refusing to engage. When Ethan moved to the bench press, the tension reached a boiling point. As he adjusted the plates, the man's voice cut through the hum of the gym. "You young guys think you know everything, huh?" Ethan froze, the barbell resting in his hands. Slowly, he turned to face the man. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a steely edge. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone even. The gym seemed to grow quieter. Conversations slowed, and a few heads turned toward the commotion. The man shrugged, clearly emboldened by the attention. "I'm just saying maybe you should stick to what you're good at," he said with a sneer. Ethan didn't take the bait. Instead, he gave the man a long, measured look before turning back to his workout. But the air was thick with unspoken tension, and it was clear that the man wasn't going to let it go. He muttered more insults under his breath, his frustration evident. Ethan finished his set, ignoring the simmering hostility, and moved to the water fountain a few steps away. As Ethan unscrewed his water bottle, the man followed, leaning against the wall nearby. "Hey," the man said sharply. "I'm talking to you." Ethan paused, his grip tightening on the bottle. He took a deliberate sip of water, letting the silence hang between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "What do you want?" The man's smirk returned, though it carried a harder edge now. You don't have to act all tough, he said. If you're struggling, just say so. Can help. Ethan turned to face him fully, his expression unreadable. Struggling, he repeated. The only thing I'm struggling with is your inability to take a hint. A few gym-goers paused their workouts, sensing the shift in tone. The man's face darkened, his bravado cracking. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. You've got a smart mouth, kid. You better watch it. Ethan's posture didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. You need to back off, he said evenly. Now the man's anger boiled over. He stepped into Ethan's space, his fists clenched. Or what, he spat. What are you going to do about it? The gym seemed to hold its collective breath. A young woman behind the counter whispered something to her coworker, but neither moved to intervene. Nearby, a man on a treadmill hesitated, glancing between Ethan and the aggressor. Ethan didn't flinch. He remained perfectly still, his expression calm but focused. Last chance, he said quietly. Walk away. The man sneered and reached out, grabbing Ethan's arm roughly. Gasps rippled through the gym. For a moment, Ethan didn't move, his body eerily still. Then, in a blur of motion, he twisted free, his grip snapping onto the man's wrist with precision. In one swift, fluid motion, Ethan turned the man's arm, forcing him to release his hold. The man let out a startled yelp, stumbling back as Ethan stepped away, keeping his stance solid and controlled. Don't touch me, Ethan said, his voice low and steady. The man's face contorted with anger and humiliation. With a roar, he lunged at Ethan, but Ethan moved like water, sidestepping the attack and using the man's momentum against him. In one seamless motion, Ethan swept the man's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. The impact echoed through the gym, followed by stunned silence. The man groaned, dazed and humiliated. Ethan stood over him, his posture relaxed but commanding. You done? He asked, his tone calm. The man glared up at him, his bravado replaced with fear. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his wrist. You're crazy, he spat. You think you can just... Enough, Ethan cut him off. You've embarrassed yourself enough. Leave. A gym employee finally stepped forward, her voice shaky. Sir, you need to go, she said. The man hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. The stares from the other gym-goers were heavy with judgment. His shoulders slumped, and he grabbed his bag, muttering angrily as he stormed out. As the door swung shut behind him, the gym exhaled collectively. A few people clapped, the sound hesitant at first, then growing. Ethan raised a hand, signaling for silence. It's over, he said simply. The crowd began to disperse, though whispers and glances lingered. A young man approached Ethan cautiously. That was incredible, he said. Are you like some kind of fighter? Ethan shook his head with a faint smile. Just someone who knows how to handle himself, he replied. Later in the locker room, Ethan packed his bag in silence. As he zipped it up, the young woman from the counter appeared at the door. Hey, she said hesitantly. I just wanted to say thanks. That was intense. Ethan nodded. No problem. You did fine. Not everyone knows how to handle situations like that. She hesitated. How did you stay so calm? He was so aggressive. Ethan leaned against the bench, folding his arms. It's not about staying calm. It's about knowing you can handle yourself. Fear loses its grip when you're prepared. She tilted her head. Are you trained? A little, Ethan said with a small shrug. I spent some time in martial arts. It's less about fighting and more about discipline. The woman nodded thoughtfully. Thanks again, she said. You reminded me that standing up for yourself matters. As Ethan walked out into the cool evening air, he felt a sense of quiet resolve. He hadn't planned for any of this, but maybe it was meant to happen. Maybe someone in that gym needed to see what it looked like to stand firm. Strength wasn't about size or bravado. It was about composure, resilience, and refusing to let intimidation win. And that lesson, he hoped, would stick with them long after the moment had passed.